In this video, I'll be going through the process of replacing bearings inside of a Toyota electromagnetic drive coupling unit. The particular unit I have here is from a 2010 Venza. I'm going to replace both the bearings in this unit. I'm going to show you the parts involved and go through the process of it, and hopefully it helps somebody out.
Okay, let's take a look at some parts. There are two bearings inside of this drive unit, and as you can see, I have 3 bearings here. More about that in a minute. Before we get into these ones, don't go running and purchasing these, because these units vary in size. They don't all have the same size bearings in them. With that said, by looking at the bearings, you can get part numbers off of them. But they are not Toyota part numbers. They are from NSK. Now, as you can see, that's a Toyota package. That's because this particular bearing, this size, this 95DSF01, is available from a Toyota dealer if you're looking for, if you're looking at it under parts for a RAV4. I don't know which year. I don't know the part number. It's not on the box here. Sorry. This came with this bearing because I bought it on eBay. This is like a water protective slinger or whatever you call it. I also don't have part numbers for that. But the way you look at these bearings up is you look at the part number. If you can't see the part number, you can't find it. You can also look them up by the size. Three dimensions required for each bearing in order to look it up. They're available from NSK, Koyo, probably other places. But what you're going to need is an inside diameter. In this case, this one is 95 millimeters. An outside diameter. This is 120, and you're going to need thickness, 17 millimeters here. Like I said, they don't all have the same size bearings, so make sure you pull out your unit first, check the sizes. You can use a caliper for that. If you want to measure it in inches and convert, you can also use standard measuring tape. It should be close enough. It's not like a 1 millimeter difference between bearings. It's generally like 10 or 15. So anyway, that's the front bearing for this unit. Rear bearing. This is a 6911 VV or ZZ. That's the dimensions. I want to talk about these two letters here. If you see this, if you see a bearing that's VV, that means sealed. You can find that in an NSK bearing guide, those details. This is the bearing style that came out of this unit, so that's what I'll be putting back into it. And if you see ZZ, that is a shielded bearing. Same size, but different seal basically. So this one's stronger, but I'd like to use this one, but since it wasn't in the unit originally, I'm just going to go with this. Alright, time for the repair itself. Now, I've already disassembled some of this stuff leading up to this point, but I'll just go through and show you what I did here. The first thing I did was, this is where the wire connector was. I disassembled that connector, which allowed me to pull these wires through, and that's going to keep them from getting broken, hopefully. So do that first. If you don't know how to take apart a connector, it's pretty easy, especially on this one. It has this thing here. That's the basically locks the pins in. Pull that out. Get in there with a pick. Just release the little fingers that hold in those wire pins. Just get in there with a pick or a small screwdriver. Pull that down like that, and just pull the wire out of the back. So once you got this, you want to go to the front. And that slinger is going to be on there. So, you know, get you a pry bar, pry it off. The next thing you're going to want to do is take care of a snap ring that's on there. It's a big one here. So it's like that. Pry it apart, take that off. Easier said than done, of course. So then you're down to this point. Get yourself some blocks. Now when you position these, make sure that you put it here on the case. clear of the internals. And you want to avoid this piece, this tab, and that connector, of course. So you put that on there. Tap it with your hammer. And that's going to come off. So you can hear that's pretty bad. So now this is what you're left with. You got 2 more snap rings on here. These 2 right here. This one sits on the inside, or I should say it sits against the outside of that bearing. This one sits on the inside. So I don't remember what order, probably doesn't matter. Take those 2 off. Snap ring pliers. And now you're getting to this point, and you're probably wondering, how does this thing come out? Well, luckily it's a pretty loose press fit, and you can actually remove this rear electromagnet unit with the bearing by just using 2 pretty short pry bars. And you'll have a little bit of a lip on here that you can just get one of these or 2 of these under, and you want to start and work your way around, just kind of prying these up. I did this without a vise, but you know, if you lock this in a vise, that would be even easier. Just make sure you don't mar it up. So you go around, you work this around. Of course, you're avoiding that electrical component. You're avoiding this ear. You don't want to pry on that, probably, just in case. Hang on, I left something out. You're going to want to use a puller of some type in order to remove that piece. Where you'll need the pry bars is if you need to make enough gap for the puller itself to grab onto. So if it's not wide enough, you'll be using those pry bars to widen that gap, unless you have a very low profile claw on your puller. In that case, you'll just pull that on or put that on and then pull that off. And that's going to allow you to remove that. So now we can replace the bearing, now that we have this out, just by tapping it through. And then we'll tap this one out. Save your old bearings, because they come in handy for reinstalling the new ones sometimes when you need something to force the bearing in against, and it gives you the exact size you need in order to apply the right amount of pressure. Okay, got both the bearings out, and I went ahead and cleaned this up. Just acetone on this with a paper towel. Didn't really need much more on this one. This one had some rust on it off the bearing, just some grit too. So clean that up with some Scotch-Brite paper towel, and then put a little gear oil on there for lubricant. Something interesting I'm finding here. Here's the bearing that came out of this housing here. It's got a seal on it. This one doesn't. So that tells me 2 things. One, obviously this is not the exact part. And 2, I'm kind of worried about this bearing's ability to keep out water. So, I don't know. Don't really have any other options. I'm going to just install this and see how it goes. Okay, both bearings are in. Here's the front one. Nice and smooth. That rear bearing with the 2 snap rings, one on the outside, one on the inside. So that's it. Getting real close to the end here. Just put this through there, put the connector on, and I think that's about it. Ready to install after that. So as I was going in to finalize this assembly, I had noticed that one of these wires is coming apart. Pull these wires through. That's going to keep them from getting broken, hopefully. And it still has continuity. It's still connected by a few strands right there, but It's not going to last long. I can't send it out like this, so I'm going to go ahead and try to make that repair. And of course, it's breaking right at that plastic right there. So I'm going to have to cut this back a little bit and see if I can solder that in. That's the only way I see that happening. Alright, that wasn't too bad. Here's what I got to work with. I can deal with this. Alright, so after all that, this is our finished product. And by far, the most difficult part of this job, I think, was installing this ring back onto the front. And actually, what happened is I ended up bending up the new one. So I just used the original one, which is fine. But yeah, this was tricky. One thing, don't forget, when you're doing the install, to put some silicone in this wire hole. Otherwise, you're going to have water intrusion. And here you can see that's where I did the repair on that wire and the plastic piece. And that's just silicone sealant in there. And I put tape around it to kind of give it a mold to conform to. And that's it. It's ready for install.
Okay, the repair is all complete. That vehicle's back on the road. After doing this repair, I just want to say that after going through the process, seeing the condition of this unit and the wear points of it, also taking parts into consideration and partial incompatibility, as you saw with that O-ring, I would recommend that if you can't afford it, to just get the new replacement unit right from the dealer and just save yourself some headaches. However, if you like to do stuff yourself, you're looking to do this as a project, or you just have no other choice and you have to rebuild your unit, I hope that the information I provided here helps you out.